entrants of AKT holders potentially, or people who are acquiring tokens. And ultimately, one of the reasons why inflation is supposed to trend down also is where we were hoping, at least, I mean, you can't do this perfectly, of course, right? But we were hoping that inflation would trend down as adoption rises, and adoption has been rising steadily. And we're working on some really cool stuff that, I think you'll be able to hear more about next week as far as additional use cases, right? So when you guys saw the huge peak and spike that we've been able to sustain with onboarding PKT along with other use cases onto Akash Network, that was just a kind of a single moment in time, right? A single use case rather. So as we onboard additional communities, 1 to 2 to 3 to 10 to hundreds and thousands ultimately and more, that demand will just continue to rise, and the inflation should come down, and those two things should kind of go in opposite directions, because as we get to a point where the network is sufficiently mature and a couple things have to fall into place as well for taking income, which is something I think we should spend some time with in another episode of this, and talk about in more detail. So yeah, TLDR, inflation coming down. Why? Because we're oversupply as far as where we're projected that we wanted to be at this point in time. And what is the impact? Reduction in the rate of new tokens coming into the market, and benefit to existing token holders. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at now, and why this proposal is what the impact rather of this proposal, and why it's coming through now.
Very cool. Thanks for that. And for those listening in, if you do have questions for Cheng, feel free to make a speaker request, and I'll include you in on the conversation. I do have maybe one quick question, maybe a simple question for you, Cheng, and maybe one that
fire away.
can,
of course.
Yeah, just to kind of get the conversation going. So right now, like if you go, for example, to Kepler, you'll see it says earn up to 45.48% per year if you stake AKT. And then on the governance proposal that Chandra Station put out, there's actually 4 numbers. So at the bottom of the proposal changes, it says inflation max from 40% to 25%, inflation minimum from 25% to 15%. So right now, it says that you can, the inflation is 48.48%. So it says up to. What does it mean by up to? Like because I think numbers, I think it's like very cut and dry, black and white, like, red and green, whatever.
Yeah. No, great question.
Yeah, I think you know where I'm getting at. Like, what will it be exactly? Is it precisely, or does it really fluctuate kind of daily, weekly, monthly?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. So number one, the official inflation rate, as far as like if you were just to stake, like for example, if you were to stake 100 AKT and the rate doesn't change and you don't do anything, you don't restake it, etc., what is that going to be? So that rate currently is 33.22%. And the reason why Kepler shows a higher rate, because they imply some amount of compounding, right? Which means you can effectively get a rate that is higher than that. So the APR, or the inflation rate, currently is 32.33%. But let's say you stake your 100 AKT, you get some amount of inflation tokens every day. If you take those tokens and you put it back in, right? At the end of a year, if you continue doing that every single day, the tokens that you would have gotten is going to be greater than the 33.22%, right? And that's what kind of Kepler is saying. They have a greater frequency of compounding, aka claiming those tokens and putting back in. So here, Kepler is obviously, they want to, show healthier rates, and it behooves everyone to see it. But what this rate shows here, why this is different than what you see, for example, on one of our explorers, as you see the actual inflation or reward rate, is because of compounding. So the what's displayed is the APR in like our explorers, that 33% and change, and what's displayed in Kepler is basically, you call it like an APY, right? Because it's taking into account compounding. And if you compound more frequently, you'll earn a higher rate than someone who compounds less frequently. That's just kind of the basic difference there between what's published on Kepler versus what you see in our explorers like Big Dipper or MintScan or something like that. And in terms of the 4 numbers that's in the kind of proposal of changes section in Chandra Station's proposal here, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I'm going to geek out a little bit here. Hopefully you guys can follow along. I'll try to make it as simple easier to understand as possible, right? It's not too complicated, just a couple of things to wrestle with in your mind. I'm sure those of you who are developers know, but anyway, for me, there are a couple of things governing where inflation needs to be, specifically for Cosmos chains. I don't know how other chains are designed, but for anything built on the Cosmos SDK, there's a maximum inflation, a minimum inflation, so that governs a band where inflation can't go above and can't go below. So there's a floor and a ceiling, right? So in the proposal here, where the existing floor is 25%, the existing ceiling is 40%. We're proposing lowering that to a ceiling of 25% and a floor of 15%. So ultimately, actual true inflation will fall somewhere in between those two numbers, right? So where it is going to be precisely, hard to say, but it'll fall somewhere between 25 and 15%. Compared to where it is now, 33%, it'll probably be a decrease of, at least, 8% or so, right? To get to 25, being the peak. Now, what governs where in that range it falls is going to be a function of how many tokens are bonded versus how many tokens we target to be bonded. So within the blockchain itself, you set a parameter, your target bonded rate. I think for us, it's like 67%, and versus actual bonded rate is something like 70-ish%, right? So if your current actual bonded rate is greater than your target, inflation will tend to trend towards the floor. The reason being, hey, there are more tokens than what we projected or want or need to be bonded. The incentives are too great to encourage people to bond. Therefore, too many people are bonding, and the blockchain will automatically adjust inflation down, given these parameters, to push inflation lower so that more people unbond and do other things with it, like LP, for example, right? And the inverse is true as well, where if actual bonded rate is lower than your projected bonded rate, like, man, too few people are actually bonding or staking their tokens, we need more, inflation will start to trend up in order to incentivize people dynamically, right, to bond their tokens, right? So that's kind of just what's built into the Cosmos SDK. So again, the maximum and minimum just sets the floor and the ceiling for where the rate can go. It can't go above the ceiling. It can't go below the floor. And the what's governing whether inflation trends towards the floor or towards the ceiling is going to be what the staking ratio is or bonded ratio is currently versus what the target bonded ratio, and the last bit is going to be rate of change, which is kind of how fast it gets to the ceiling or gets to the target floor. That's so yeah, those are the parameters that govern inflation.
Got it. Thanks for that. And maybe one more quick question before we can open up to the audience. If you guys do have questions, feel free just to make a speaker request. I'm checking it out. No requests so far. And I know you guys have questions, so feel free to make a request and we will have you jump in. Last question is, if I'm delegating tokens and the inflation rewards are 48% right now, why would I want this to happen? Why? Because I can go vote. I can say yes or no. I want this proposal to be, approved by the community. Why would I want that to go down if I'm, not getting as many tokens in the long run? Like, do you have thoughts on that?
Great question. No, of course, I myself am a DeFi degen, so I love them yields, right? The bigger the yields, the better, right? That's kind of like the initial outset, right? And so the challenge always is for us, it's never been about like this perpetual super high inflation curve, right? Or inflation rate. We wanted to have an initially high inflation in lieu of usage and utility in the beginning, and as utility grows, that inflation should come down. Because we would have sufficiently bootstrapped the network, right, and encouraged people to kind of get in the early days. So as an existing holder of AKT and staker of AKT, why would I want this rate to go down? Well, number one, it's kind of a relative game, right? Where you're saying, okay, I, as an early adopter, would have benefited earlier on for staking my tokens. New entrants would not have will not kind of reap the same benefits that I have been thus far. That's part one of it. And that's a relative sense. I know it's not absolute. The other thing is for the health of the network and kind of health of our tokenomics generally, right? If you're holding a substantial amount of tokens, you don't want to be one of those. It's all over the place, right? You guys look in DeFi and you look in crypto in general now, where if there's an oversupply of tokens with no real utility, I mean, which we already do have, right? We just don't have it at sufficient scale that we want to get to. Not at this current time, at least, but we're building towards it. Is you have an overinflation of supply with no utility to the token. And what's the use of just continuously minting tokens that are going to continue to decrease in value, right? For both both users and holders, right? Users meaning users of the product itself for compute, and then holders who are holding AKT, for the sake of holding AKT for governance, etc. So for the overall health and stability and growth of the network, it's ultimately in the long run healthier to introduce some scarcity, right? You don't want it to just kind of grow way out of control. For example, like if you had 100 AKT now, and inflation continue to go high, you're like, yay, I'm making 100% APR, APY, right? Let's say on my tokens, but every month my token value is decreasing. That's not necessarily a good thing to have, a good dynamic to have, right? Of course, there's no guarantee one way or the other, but continuing to introduce excess supply without the necessary sinks as far as usage and utility is bad for existing token holders. So this proposal is ultimately good in that it introduces more scarcity by decreasing the rate of new supply generation. And yeah, that's really the biggest linchpin.
Cool. Thank you for describing that for me. I think it's always good to hear kind of why these things exist, and that's super beneficial. So I appreciate that. There was one other quick question I was going to ask, and I can't remember, but that's okay because we do have some speaker requests coming in. So first up, I want to introduce NT. I'm just going to call you NT Ape because I love the profile picture. Feel free to introduce yourself and
That is an
yeah, go ahead
awesome
and ask your.
profile.
Yeah, I love that. Feel free to introduce
Hi,
yourself and ask your
everybody.
question.
I'm Hossein. I'm one of the biggest fan of Jungle Freaks. That's my profile picture, and I am holding about 3 of them. So, and I'm a big fan of Akash. I have about 3,000 Akash, and I am staking it through Cosmos network. So the question that I have, it's about the mining. I don't understand. Is there any miner available for people who can mine? Can you guys explain about it? That would be great.
Yeah, sure. So for AKT itself, we don't have an AKT miner. So the only way to get additional AKT is by staking your as you have, right? If you have your
It's a
existing
proof of
3,000
work,
AKT.
right?
No, it's a proof of stake. We're a proof of
Sorry, proof
stake
of
coin. We're not a
stake.
proof of work.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes
Yeah,
sense.
we're a proof of stake coin. So yeah, you'll in staking our token to various validators, well, any of our validators, right? Will earn you the inflation rewards. So yeah, proof
I
of stake.
see.
Mm-hmm.
All right, sounds good. The reason why I asked because I'm confused. I have seen a few pictures that are the Akash miners.
Oh yes, yes. So
Yeah,
okay,
so
I can
that's
talk about
why.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the early days, so this was the thing. It was called the Akash Super Mini, and when we originally envisaged its creation, I think we bit off a bit more than we could chew, just to be, totally frank with everyone. And the marketplace is not ready at this particular point in time for such a device, right? So, for example, the how this device was, and we have a prototype of this, and how it would work is, for example, if everyone were to get a Super Mini, you could plug in the Super Mini, and it would essentially act as your own mini computer on our network of providers, right? And as workloads get distributed and hosted on your Super Mini would earn AKT because you would essentially be giving your compute capacity via this device, right? And along with your power and bandwidth to people to deploy workloads. But currently, because the network, as far as like demand wise, isn't at the scale that would even that would fully be able to fully utilize a network like a Super Mini, a machine like the Super Mini, right? So we definitely need to get everything as far as demand and supply also at greater scale, and increasing exponentially before a device like that would be able to reap any particularly like tangible benefits. So it's not really necessarily a miner per se. It's more like, hey, kind of have your own little mini data center, right? That was the idea of it, and that's been kind of put on hold indefinitely, just until we have a lot of other things to do. Right? We're not a hardware company; we're a software company first, and so we have a lot of a lot of work ahead of us to get done, from building additional usage and building demand and use cases before we can even like touch on that subject again.
I see.
Yeah.
And do you guys have any plan to be listed on the other exchanges?
Oh, believe you me, Hassan, we are working on it, man. I don't know if you were here earlier on, but that is rest assured for the community. It is a huge priority for us in the company to increase our liquidity and access, right? And what better way? There's no other way to increase liquidity and access than through exchanges, right? Both decentralized and centralized. We're not, all in one or all in the other, right? So it's something that we're working on aggressively, and one of the biggest kind of stumbling blocks, right, for a lot of Cosmos projects or is being a Cosmos project, right? So just to give you guys a little bit of insight in terms of how centralized exchanges work, when they list tokens, they have a small integration technical team to do the integration. For ERC20 tokens, there's a reason why most tokens that are listed are ERC20, because they don't have to do any integration work, right? They just have to connect the contract and boom, there they go, right? Everything just works as it is. But for every single Cosmos SDK token built using the Cosmos SDK, they have to do custom integrations for, because everyone has different modules, etc. It's like all slightly different. The wallets are different. So they have to do technical integration work, which for them is very expensive because they can't have like a gigantic wallets team because of security and multi-sig issues. You know what I mean? And so that stuff slows it down. So if you guys are super bullish on Akash, tell your sisters, tell your wives, tell your friends, get out there, tweet at all the big exchanges that we all know and love. We're trying to get on as many as we possibly can, right? Especially the big ones. I just can't mention their names for sake of, just we're bound to secrecy there. And so it's a slog. Believe me, it's a pain in the butt for some of these exchanges. Man, we've been talking to them for over a year. It's just a huge pain. So if you guys in the community can round up support, and get their attention, go for it, please. We would love that.
I do. I support you guys, and I try to, tell my friends, my family, my cousins. I actually talked to my cousin last week about Akash Network because he's a big fan of Algorand, and I told him, hey, this is one of the best project. You should, I would say, invest, a few $1,000 or $100, whatever you can do it. I'm doing my things, but I really appreciate you guys. That you guys working hard on this amazing project.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Hosen.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
So I know we're running a little over. Cheng, you can go over a minute. Yeah, is that all right?
I can go over a little bit. Yeah, no problem. If everyone's okay with that.
Yeah,
happy
absolutely.
To give some time. Yeah.
We're starting to get some questions coming in. So next up to the stage is Punzi. Feel free to introduce yourself, and you can ask your question for Cheng.
Hi guys. I don't think I have enough time for an introduction, but I'm Punzi. Yeah, I love Akash, and on and on. I support you guys all the way. I was wondering about the timing of this decision. Why? Because we're right at a point where multiple use cases will be unlocked, right? We will see somehow of a bigger shift in utility and let's say scarcity, organic scarcity through utility. And maybe don't know why this came right now when we might have a disruption moment in tokenomics and liquidity. I mean, it's not a bad thing. I just want to know somehow if everything is taken into account. Yeah, because you have to couple it with the exchanges, right, to have much more opportunity for liquidity and all that. Just a subject. I don't think it's that much of a question.
No, I think thank you for that, Punzi. I think it's an insightful question, and I appreciate it. So, as far as timing wise, why now when we are on the cusp of introducing, we're not introducing, but generating, additional use cases or and various ways that through use case through utility itself, it would make tokens more scarce, right? Because you would need AKT and spend it, right, in order to use Akash, right? So that in and of itself is like a way of sinking tokens, if you will. So in that light, like because one, we're already significantly oversupply, so the rate of growth has to come down anyway. We should have not we ultimately these are governance proposals, but things the dynamic and decay curve, for example, right, as far as timing wise, is a one of the big hallmark features of our upcoming mainnet upgrade, which is hopefully going to happen within depending on test nets and all that stuff, and when that's going to launch, relatively soon. So with the dynamic inflation curve, what it's going to do is essentially peg ourselves to where we ought to be relative to the curve that we published in the white paper initially, right? So this initial proposal aims to kind of dampen that initial impact, because if we don't do anything, the gap between current supply and projected supply will continue to widen. The gap will continue to increase. And so when the dynamic inflation curve, decay curve, ultimately passes and becomes live, the initial adjustment can be very big, right? It might be a big shock to the community at that point in time. So this initial proposal is like kind of a almost like a highlight to the community, like say, hey, this is coming, right? Nothing to be alarmed of. This is what was envisioned in the white paper. We kind of veered a little bit off track at this particular moment in time, but we're course correcting, right? And ultimately, the dynamic decay curve will ensure that we stay on course without additional governance proposals. So the timing wise, it's kind of synced up to preempt, if you will, the adjustments that will be triggered by the dynamic decay curve, which would be launched, which is going to be tested in the next testnet 3, and ultimately fold into mainnet 3, which is going to be occurring relatively soon. And that's really the timing purpose. And to the other component of your question that I'll close with, for this subject at least, is like, wouldn't the use cases or utility itself decrease or increase demand and therefore decrease supply, introduce more scarcity? No, absolutely true. But we still have to remember that currently we are still, at least 10 million AKT oversupply, which is a ton of tokens, right? So there's more than enough supply out there for things to be used, and we're more than ready to provide that liquidity, right, via additional exchanges, via programs like the faucet, right, once we get that fixed, and yeah, and just and other incentive measures that can be put in place for use cases as well as providers as well. So there's no we won't hurt the growth of utility on Akash Network by doing this. And so yeah, that's not something I really think we should super worry about.
And one little small question, quick.
Mhm.
Do you see it auto-adjusted in the future, the rate of
Yes, yeah. So
inflation?
exactly, with the dynamic inflation curve, the inflation will be automatically adjusted without the requirement of additional governance proposals.
Great, thank you.
Yep, you got it. And that
Cool.
feature,
Thank
by the way, is going to come mainnet 3. It's not going to come right away. That's probably like what, 2 months out, maybe month and a half.
Cool. Thank you, Punzi, for that. I think we have time for maybe 2 more quick questions, and we have 2 more people in the audience here. So first up, we're going to go to Stonks, which is also a fantastic name and a great profile picture. So feel free to introduce yourself, Stonks, and ask your question for Cheng.
Hi guys, thanks for hearing me out. I think you guys are doing a great job. I'm not going to take a long time. I had read the documents I don't know, probably about a year ago or maybe 9 months ago, and I saw some projections about the earnings, the potential earnings given a particular market share taken. How are those projections changed by the new token numbers and the new tokenomics? Do those change, or does that stay the same basically?
Great question. It doesn't change at all, right? So in terms of how big the market is only growing. So so let's just look at the different parameters, right? Like how big the market is, is what the market is. It's only growing, and how much Akash can penetrate that particular market, that's a variable because it depends on how quickly we grow, and how good the UI is, the UX, and the network is a bunch of factors, right? How quickly we can onboard additional use cases that'll ultimately determine what type of market share we get. So those two things definitely don't change it. It's just these are just circumstances of the environment. The other thing, as far as like the specific to the tokenomics, by adjusting inflation rate at this particular juncture in time, it doesn't impact take rate whatsoever. So take rate, for those of you who don't know, is a feature that has not yet been implemented live on the blockchain, and it has to be done so through a governance proposal as well. So when the time comes for that take rate to be implemented, it'll definitely be really, really visible. We'll be talking about it and everything else, right? So it'll be a huge moment in time when that does get implemented. And there are a couple of thoughts and specific routes that we're thinking about in concert with the community, because ultimately it's a community-driven thing as well. As far as like how that take income can be implemented. But yeah, to your point, very specifically, it doesn't fudge the math. It doesn't like fudge that example, and that very much still applies.
Thank you very much. These are very good news, and I guess I'll see you on the moon in a few months.
Thank you, Stocks.
All right. Bye.
I love it.
Thanks, Donks. That was awesome. Cool. So I think we'll do one final question before we wrap things up. Next up is W Breakout. W Breakout, feel free to introduce yourself and ask your question for Cheng.
Hi guys, hi Cheng. Big fan of the concept, the project. Really doing a good job. Thanks for everything. Just a quick question, I guess from an investor's point of view. I'm not a techie at all. Just an investor. My understanding was like the staking rewards would have been sort of finding their way into the market, people would be trying to cash out and creating a sell pressure of sorts on the token. Is there any data or any rough estimates of how much that goes into the market? And because of this inflation reduction, should we expect like a reduction in sell pressure, so to speak, or the price of the token would benefit immediately because of this?
Yeah, so the definitely so I mean, simply by looking at like where we are as far as token supply versus where we were projected to be, right? We're at least 10 million oversupply. So if we assume, I think it's a good assumption to put forth that at least some of that supply is making its way into the open market, right? So definitely from that perspective, it would and does introduce sell pressure, at least in some sense, right? Whether what percentage that is, I don't entirely know. That's something we're actually trying to build more insight into. Actually, just yesterday, I spoke to a data science intern that we're going to bring onto the team, and one of his projects, first projects, is going to be helping me map some of this out so that we can have more predictive models, and just reporting, right? In order to like see what large accounts are doing and kind of just understand the flow of tokens and where they're going. So as far as like precisely how much of these inflation rewards are making its way into the open market, adding to sell pressure, I don't know. But I can say that it's a very good assumption to say that at least some of these are, right? And so a decrease in the rate in which new supply is going to be created it will decrease the rate at which new tokens are being created, which should decrease the amount of new tokens coming into the market, right? Potentially sell pressure as well. As far as what the impact will be ultimately, hard to say. Obviously, we can't comment directly on price from various different reasons, and several 3- and 4-letter agencies would have a go at that. But as far as decreasing supply, increasing scarcity, decreasing the rate at which new supply is being generated will definitely, I think, all else being equal, decrease the rate at which new supply hits the open market, which should decrease sell pressure, right? Hopefully the market holds up. If there's like some sort of craziness, if Elon goes out and tweets something crazy once again, who knows what's going to happen, right? these days. And increasingly crypto markets are more and more so highly correlated to traditional capital markets, right? The last couple of kind of corrections and pullbacks have been led by equities, as you've seen if you guys follow equities at all. So there's that high correlation there is going to put a little fudge something a little bit there. Increases our beta to the market for good and for bad. But yeah, so ultimately to answer your question, does it decrease supply? Yes. Introducing scarcity? Yes. Would it decrease sell pressure? I expect it to, for sure. Simply, if let's say 10% of the tokens come into the market, right? That's newly minted every single day or month or whatever it is, and we decrease the rate at which new tokens are being generated by, 20%. It's a smaller number, so I definitely hope that it would decrease sell pressure, and ultimately that's one of the reasons why it would benefit early token holders.
No, thanks. That's my premise as well. But yeah, thanks for confirming.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Breakout. And real quick question before you jump off and we end things. Where are you calling in from?
I'm from Scotland.
Very cool. Well,
cool.
Hopefully it's not too late over there. Actually, it's 11 o'clock here, so yeah, I think it's pretty good. So yeah, thanks for staying up late
9:46, so...
on a Friday even. Wow, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
Cool. And with that, we're over on time due to some early technical glitches on my end. I apologize for that. We are planning to do another one of these in a couple weeks and just some alpha. It's going to be about escrow and the inflation curve. So mark your calendars. We'll be sending out some invites for that coming up. I want to thank you guys all for attending. Thank you very much, Cheng. Any other final thoughts, quick, Cheng, before we wrap things up?
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Adam, for setting this up and hosting. I would love to also understand your guys' feedback. What do you feel about hosting this here on Discord versus other mediums? We definitely want to give this puppy a try here. And also it's in the note here under the office hours if you click on the event, but this particular thing is being recorded simply for the sake of for marketing and stuff like that. And if we want to have little tidbits of quotes of conversations, we're not going to mention names and stuff like that, but just to have things like, hey, here was a soundbite from that was interesting that we covered during the office hours. That is something that we're doing for this particular case, right? To have additional marketing content, and we're always trying to up level our marketing apparatus and just do more stuff and more engaging things, and have the rest of the community to be able to benefit from it as well, for those who didn't have the opportunity to tune in. So we did record it for those purposes, just to let you guys know. And please give us feedback, what you guys thought of this entire thing, this format. Thank you so much for coming. Look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Cheng. And for more information on the proposal, you can go to our forum, or you can go to the Kepler browser and check out the stakings channel or the stakings page. I'll put a link to the proposal in the general chat so you guys can go in there and read on it and leave some notes and feedback. But other than that, I want to thank you guys for taking time out of your day to chat with us. Stay tuned for the next one, and we'll see you guys soon. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.